Okay, well, welcome everyone. We are excited you are all here to enjoy the fourth and final webinar of this four-part series brought to you by Sublette County Conservation District and Sublette BOCES. We will be recording this webinar and it will be available on our SCCD webpage as well as the BOCES website at a later time. Usually I can get them up within the same day or tomorrow. And so you can send that to people who weren't able to make it today or watch again if you have to jump off early or want to circle back to any of the information that you get today. And we would love to hear from you. So please write down any questions you have throughout the presentation, and then we can unmute at the end and do a Q&A session so that we can get all the questions answered. So with that, I would like to introduce today's presenters. We have Sage Price. She is the manager of the Ryegrass Ranch. She was born and raised here in Pinedale, Wyoming, and moved out to the ranch when she was 12 years old. After school, Sage left and spent time in North Carolina and Colorado before realizing that the ranch was still her calling. Her passions are spending time with her two teenage girls, cooking, and enjoying the summers in Sublette County. Our other speaker is Melanie Purcell. She is the Wildlife and Habitat Program Manager here at the Sublette County Conservation District, where she has worked for the past 13 years. She came to Pinedale in 2006 after obtaining her Master of Science degree from the University of Wyoming, where she had the opportunity to work with the elusive pygmy rabbit. Melanie enjoys learning from our local landowners and bringing agriculture with conservation, agriculture with conservation, as well as hiking, camping, and spending time with her animals. So with that, Melanie and Sage, go ahead and take it away. So just remain muted during the presentation and then we'll unmute at the end. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jess, and welcome, Sage.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think we're going to go ahead and start off by listening to Sage tell us a little bit about her story. Would you like to talk about your story in relation to Ryegrass Ranch?
Yeah, so as Jess said, we moved out to the Ryegrass when I was 12. It was part of Hirsch's working cattle ranch, and my dad was the mechanic. In '97, it was purchased by a developer in Jackson, or from Jackson, and he wanted to turn it into a private fly fishing ranch. So he subdivided the around 3,000 acres into 20 different lots and sold the property, and then it became the private fly fishing ranch. And my dad went on as the manager there. I went off to college at in Cheyenne and was going for agribusiness. And one day in class, I kind of realized I'm never going to manage a ranch. Like this isn't really the field I want to be in. So I went more into hospitality and hotels and restaurants and golf courses and just kind of a different direction in life. And then as Jess said, I moved to North Carolina and Colorado, and then kind of in 2015, life happened again, and I was able to come back to the ranch, and my parents wanted to retire, so I took over the ranch. I knew how things had been done for the past 20 years and knew that blending agriculture and hospitality and fishing on the ranch, there might be some better ways to do it. And since I had left college for agriculture, I knew that I needed kind of some assistance in that area. And so a large portion of the ranch is land trusted. And so Summer Schultz was actually on property one day monitoring, and her and I were talking, and I was just kind of talking about some of the challenges I was having with fences and ditches and just ranch life, the components of that. And so she mentioned that the conservation district might be able to help, that they had some programs and that it was worth a conversation. So in 2017, we went in and had a meeting and just kind of discussed what some of the options might be and what really was available to ranchers and landowners. So
I know you were pretty hesitant initially, so what kind of finally convinced you to move forward with the conservation plan?
Yeah, it was pretty intimidating to invite another agency in, or an agency in general, because we were private and we wanted to maintain that, but looking at options and seeing. So Initially, it was a very low-key conversation. It was Mike and Bree and Summer and I sitting in the conference room and just kind of talking about what the Conservation District offered and what programs, and then just kind of challenges that I was having on the ranch. And every time I would say something like fences, they would say, well, we can help with that. Or looking at different grazing plans, we can help with that. And so it was the low keyness, it's just a conversation was huge. A big deciding factor was that it was free. I wasn't going to be paying thousands and thousands of dollars to have a consultant come and tell me what the district could tell me and offered for free. Another big part was that I would always be in the driver's seat. If there was a part of monitoring that I didn't want done, or we didn't need, or that I felt was unnecessary, I could say no, or we could add monitoring aspects to it as well. I think my biggest hurdle was that I wanted to make sure that the information stayed private. I didn't want everyone having access to it. It was kind of, again, that fear of inviting an agency in. What exactly am I getting in bed with, and what strings are attached?
Yes, I was consistently reminding Sage that she had control of the data and that we would not be sharing it with anybody without her permission.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then another big factor was the ability to participate. I wanted to be able to be on the ground and learn about the plant species and the soil condition and the stream condition and that, but I also had 2 girls to raise and a ranch to run. So the fact that while the groups were out monitoring, I was able to pop in when I could, and when I couldn't, it was okay. You all had it handled. So
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity, take a few moments to talk about what a conservation plan is and what things you can expect to be in it. So there's 3 phases of conservation planning. The first phase is sort of the data collection and analysis portion, and that's where we sit down with you and really talk to you about what your goals and objectives are for your property. We talk about any resource concerns that you might have, whether that's noxious weeds or fences, or could be several different things, and then we go out and inventory those resources and collect that data, analyze that data. The second portion of the planning phase is sort of the decision phase, and in part of the conservation plan we formulate some alternatives, and those are really just suggestions or recommendations of things that you could apply on your property, but I really want to emphasize that there's no obligation, and that you as the landowner or the client is the decision maker on what you decide to move forward with or not move forward with. And then the final sort of phase of that is applying those projects, and that's sort of where the adaptive management comes in. And we know things often don't work out as on paper the same way on the ground, and so you evaluate what you're doing and make changes as you move forward. So a conservation plan is voluntary. It's basically just a plan to help you incorporate your operation activities with your natural resources, and also it considers your social and economic interests for your property. It's basically just a roadmap to help you document your management decisions, in a sense, what you have. I think it's always good to have some sort of record keeping system, and whether that's just a notebook you carry in your pocket that tells you how many cattle you're running this year, it was a drought year or wet year, or it helps you to make decisions in the future when you're facing those situations again. So and then some of the resources, we have sort of an acronym that we use to help us with what resources we're collecting, and that's SWAPA plus H. So we're looking at the soils on your property, what plants can grow in that soil type, how much can be produced, and what is your water situation like? Is irrigation a factor that you need help enhancing? Is it a stream? What is your livestock goals? What are your wildlife goals? And then, of course, we consider, again, those historical and socioeconomic factors that are important to you moving forward. One thing to keep in mind is that planning is complicated. It's a time-consuming process, so these plans are not developed overnight. They do take time. Some of the things that that need to be considered are the capability of the different sites on your property, your economic situation, and what your willingness to try new practices are, to help figure out what opportunities might be available to you. And then of course your ranch's relationship to the entire landscape or watershed. And then this next slide is just sort of an example of some of the things you might find in a conservation plan. So the table of contents just kind of outlines, all of those resources that we talked about. They're all talked about in the plan. And then that map is an example of one of many maps that you might see in your plan. And that one just depicts the fence inventory. So we went out and we look at what type of fence it is, what the height of your wires are, and that can help with developing pasture rotation scenarios or with wildlife friendly fence opportunities. And then that table is sort of an example of one of the tables, and the information that we collect on the ranch just sort of helps us get at what your forage production is. That helps to come up with a suggested stocking rate or goals for different plant communities on your property. Mm-hmm. So I think, let's get back to Sage's story. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce that and kind of give everybody an idea of what's included in a plan and what they are. So where is Ryegrass Ranch at now, Sage?
So in around 2018, 2019, we were owned by 9 different owners, and they loved the property, but where they were in life, it wasn't exactly what they wanted to continue doing. So I knew I wasn't done with the property and started looking at some alternatives, and ended up partnering with a group out of Montana called Beartooth. And in December of 2019, we ended up purchasing the property. And by June of 2020, we were able to start implementing some of the projects for improvements. And one of the big things was partnering with this group was they saw the benefit and the potential of the property, and they wanted to enhance it, not completely change it. And so that was really a key for me. During the sale, the conservation plan was integral. It was saved us tons in due diligence because we already had the plant inventory, the soil quality inventory, the stream conditions. And so there were plenty of times when someone would call, or they would call and say, do you have this? And I would say, yeah, it's actually in the conservation plan I sent you. So that was, it was a huge benefit and a huge asset to it.
Yeah, they were very complimentary of the plan. So that was, kind of was, made me smile. Anyway. Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about what your goals are? I think that probably helped you decide what projects you wanted to move forward with.
Mm-hmm. So one of the major things we wanted to do was improve the fishery. It had been a hatchery stocked stream for years. And so we really wanted to turn the stream back into a self-sustaining natural species stream. And then we wanted to maintain the ag operation and make sure that it was economically viable, as well as just making sure we were doing the best practices for the entire property and the land. And so it came down to, we wanted it to be financial as well as an ecological value. So again, enhancing the property, not completely changing it.
Right. So can we go ahead and maybe talk about some of the projects that you implemented? Let's maybe start with the stream structures that you built. What can you tell us about those?
So we put in 2 main types of structures, and one of them was aggregated stream structures. And what that is we were able to utilize dead trees and slash, and then put it down at the base. It's basically a beaver dam simulation, but it's underwater. And so
it allows for those flows to go over it all year instead of completely damming up the
It didn't dam it, allows it to go through. And so we took the slash, the dead trees, the limbs, all of that, put it down, and then put cobble on top of it. And so what that does is, one of our big goals was to redirect the water back into some of the old channels that had been abandoned by the stream. And all streams take on new directions, and ours kept going out into our meadows, which then caused a lot of silt because the banks would slough off. So that led us to the bank stabilization project as well. And so we did two main structures.
Yeah, that's great. So we're gonna go ahead and show you a video really quick that kind of talks about the bank stabilization projects that were implemented. It gives a good overview.
The ryegrass is a beautiful chunk of ground. Historically, the whole basin was probably willow to willow. The stream was very braided, and there's beaver dams everywhere.
We consider this an alluvial valley. So you got large volumes of water and sediment that came off of those high mountains and created these broad floodplains that created a lot of habitat diversity for a lot of species.
It's pretty obvious that it was a working ranch. The banks and the stream itself. And I think the trout population definitely shows that it's definitely not what it was historically.
All of this would have been really important Colorado River cutthroat trout habitat. This is right in the core of what they would have persisted in.
We have 11 miles of creek, over 1,000 acres of wetlands, and being able to impact that large of system is pretty significant and pretty exciting.
One of the larger challenges out here on this project are the bank lines. These vertical bank lines are just calving large blocks of sediment into the stream every year. So just getting the stream energy off that bank line reduces the sediment load in the creek. This is the first stage. We're using a technique called a brush matrix, where we put in a gravel and stone foundation. And then comes a bunch of live harvested willows that we've been harvesting from a ranch upstream. Then we put a layer of gravel over the top of that. And so what we're really doing is really building a little piece of mini floodplain between that and the high bank line. This is an example of the finished step of these bank matrices, and what you'll see on that bank line over there, you can actually see the willows projecting out, and if you didn't know better, you would probably think that had been there for years and years and years, but this was just actually finished yesterday. This part of the world periodically will go through 5-6 year drought cycles, and they seem to be escalating. So the work we're doing here, again, is keeping the sponge full in the upper watershed, so ultimately everyone will benefit all the way down to the Green River.
The creek restoration is having a profound impact on the wildlife that live here. It's created tremendous amounts of habitat in just a month's time. We're already seeing mother ducks move in, sage-grouse hens move in, and all sorts of ungulates using the property.
We, as Beartooth, wouldn't be able to do what we do without all the partners on this project in particular, and we're incredibly thankful for that.
Can't emphasize enough the ability to partner with folks like Beartooth and the other groups we've been involved with to make some of these projects happen.
With Beartooth, I was able to go from being a manager and growing up on the place to having an ownership stake in it and partner with someone who saw the potential in the property.
Ultimately, that is the goal of this investment, to create value, to create financial and ecological value for the people, the wildlife, and the agricultural productivity of this range.
So that's sort of just a nice little video that outlines the bank stabilization stuff and talks about that project a little bit. But I know there's always challenges along the way or changes you might have noticed. Can you tell us about some of those challenges or changes?
So when we first started, or when we were in the planning phases, we were actually looking at some completely different structures. And then once we got on the ground and into the project, we kind of switched which direction we were going to go. But the biggest changes have been immediate water clarity. Silt had always been an issue based on the slope of the stream as well as those banks. And so immediately seeing the water clarity and seeing this spring being able to look back and see the sub-irrigation and how those abandoned channels are coming back and just the revitalization on it. Within hours of the equipment moving downstream, watching the sage-grouse go from the upper rangelands down into those meadows and really utilizing it and just watching the difference in the wildlife. We've always kind of had the moose habitat and elk throughout the winter and all of that, but just seeing them in different parts of the ranch, and that has been really interesting.
That's interesting that it happened so quickly. It's like they were waiting on the sidelines for you to do something. Mm-hmm. So what are your plans moving forward with water?
So we're getting ready to start phase 2, which is just enhancing another section of the stream, another 4 to 6 miles. We're also doing a lot of ditch repairs just from the wear and tear on the ditches and that, and just really focusing on keeping water on the property and utilizing it correctly, and with the changes, with the adapting to what the wetlands being revitalized and that, so really kind of adjusting that. We have a couple of dams that were on property that had been kind of degraded and that, and so we fixed those to keep water in kind of the upper rangelands. And then we're still working very closely with Game and Fish. Last year we were able to take some of the Colorado cutthroat that they had raised in the Daniel hatchery, and then actually this morning we just planted about 12,000 Colorado cutthroat eggs in incubators, and so they're kind of off in a side channel and then will eventually end up in the stream. So we're still working very closely and continuing to enhance it.
That's really neat. So will they go out and like check those eggs to see if they, or do you know?
So the eggs will hatch in about 7 days and they'll stay in the incubators, and then as they get larger and stronger, we open the incubator up. They'll stay in the side channel for a while, and then when they are strong enough and large enough, they'll swim into the stream. And so yeah, we'll continue to monitor and watch and see as those grow.
Wow, that's really neat. Yeah. So I know you also implemented some grazing management changes, and some of that is in relation to the stream work. You put in some riparian fence, is that correct? And which is sort of twofold. Can you tell us kind of what the purpose of that is and what your plans are for that?
So part of the success of the stream project is being able to keep the cattle off of it until it really is established. And so we ran the riparian fence on both sides of the stream and really blocked that out. We also used to only have 2 pastures, and so we implemented 4 pastures total, and then eventually once it's established, the riparian area will also be a pasture. And so we've gone from 2 pastures to basically 5, and more of a rotational grazing system. And so that we use the high tensile electric fence. I was very used to kind of the little white wire and the pigtails and the hardships with that, and then the high intensity fence has been amazing. It's been really good and has held up really well and done exactly what we needed it to do.
And this picture over here, it sort of just shows, it's what we call a letdown fence or a laydown fence. And one of the next projects that we have planned on the property is to implement some wildlife friendly fence conversions, and we're planning to do a section of this laydown fence that gets some heavy deer pressure on it. So that'll be hopefully starting this year if everything goes as planned. So I guess there's always some lessons that are learned along the way. What are some of the lessons you learned or the challenges you've noticed?
So the biggest is that flexibility is important. We kind of planned out where the fence would go and then walked it and changed it and then walked it again and changed it and then put it in and changed it. And we still have more changes to it. We have gates where we want cattle guards. We have a section that we really want to be able to access a different area. And so just, again, the challenges that come with projects, looking at the cattle behavior, whether we all know that cattle are always where they're not supposed to be. And so just kind of working with them and getting them up in the upper rangeland as well. So we're looking at putting water and minerals and really what are our options to utilize the entire property and still be conscious of what's best for the landscape and what really making sure we're being responsible.
Yeah, because I think you found that the cattle were still trying to find every wet spot, and you were having to ride them off quite a bit, get them off of those areas, right?
Yeah.
So some of you might be wondering, where is the money to implement these projects that I want to do? I know even myself at my house, I have a ton of projects that I would like to do, but I don't have the time for or the money for. But we know that economics are a huge component of the decision-making process, and your conservation plan can help open up opportunities for you. It can help you find opportunities through things such as the NRCS Farm Bill program. Some of you may have done some of those before. They're often cost share programs to help implement different types of projects. The district deals a lot with grants, and so we are always applying for different grant opportunities to implement projects. And then, of course, you can also go the non-traditional route that Ryegrass Ranch chose to do and have investors come in and help with projects as well. But of course, you guys, it's not the investors doing all of the or supplying all of the funding. I mean, they're sort of using a combination. There's some grants involved, but sort of the important piece here is that those partners and building those relationships is essential. So I know protection of private property information is always something that people are conscientious of and something that the district is very conscientious of, but really building those partners can help leverage those funds and help provide opportunities. Trout Unlimited, some of these projects, when Sage came in, her main interest was fixing fences and improving the irrigation, and it has turned into this huge projects, and these other partners have been essential in helping with planning and finding the funding to move forward. So I think that is, it helps provide those opportunities. And
that's part of my big hesitation. And every time we meet with an agency, and that is, my question is really, what are we getting in bed with, and what are the strings attached, and how does this affect us going forward? And the agencies have really opened a lot of doors, and that's what the investors and the owners now have brought a lot to the table with financially, and then some of the connections that they've had in that, but also the local agencies and finding what exactly resources we have. And again, this started out, the previous owners didn't really have the funds or the capability or the desire to do projects. And so that's kind of really looking at that. The beginning conversation was, what can we do? Where can we start small and whatever? And then over time, it has definitely grown to a much bigger scope of project, but the partners and those relationships have been huge. So.
Great. Well, and I think one of the take-home messages here is that your story is unique. It doesn't fit into a box. I think that as natural resource professionals, we try to put all this information into these neat little boxes, but the truth is that natural resource management, agriculture, agricultural management, it's messy and things don't work out on paper like they do on the ground. And so adaptive management is key in moving forward and trying to get things to work, because some things are going to probably be a disaster and other things are going to work a lot better than you thought, like the high tensile electric fence. So, but conservation planning can really be your tool. It's always your decision to move forward with anything, and there is no obligation to do anything at all, but it can be that roadmap for you. So anyway, I know we're out of time. I want to say thank you to Sage for coming and sharing their story and talking about some of the projects they're doing on Ryegrass. If any of you are interested in talking to the district more about how we might be able to help you with planning or with project implementation, feel free to contact us. And I guess with that, we will take any questions.
Hi, this is Bettina. Pardon me for not knowing, but what waters are you working with?
We're North Cottonwood Creek.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have questions? Feel free to unmute and ask away, because these ladies are ready, ready to answer some questions.
Have the beavers come back yet?
We have started to see some beavers. We've had one historically on property that's kind of hung out, but I've seen a couple more and definitely see some of their activity.
Has your hay and forage production changed?
It's a little too early to tell right now. We just finished the project August, I think, of last year, and so that's one thing we're really looking at this year is what the production looks like. But even just seeing, we haven't started runoff yet, but just seeing the groundwater in different spots and seeing, like I said, there's evidence that it's already going into those abandoned back channels, and it's really doing what we want it to at this point. So that's our big monitoring this next year is how the production changes.
Anybody else have any questions? You guys are letting them off easy.
I've got one question. Where do you see your riparian grazing management going once you reinitiate some of that with those riparian pastures and whatnot?
So the plan is to really open it up to grazing short term and getting that benefit as well. We don't want to let it grow and turn into a fire hazard or turn into just kind of the unmanaged rangeland. So we definitely are continuing the rotational grazing and putting that riparian area into the plan.
Do you guys have do you guys know how long you plan to rest that to get the bank established, or just kind of seeing how it does?
I think it's mostly seeing how it does. It's a lot of, we're already seeing the willows that we put in, they're already sprouting, and I think it's actually going a little faster than we anticipated. And so that stabilization, really just seeing how it is, and again, the flexibility, playing it by ear and watching and making sure that we're responsible with it. So
and those willows, I think, were harvested in the same watershed, like just upstream, right? So that probably helps with some of the establishment as well.
Yeah. So what we did is we took the willows from the ranch above and grabbed the root ball with it, and so we put them in sideways, and so the willows would stabilize as they're in there sideways, and then as they shoot up, they'll do it. And so they were really transplanted within hours of being pulled. And so that's what we really try to use, as many local resources. For the slash piles, for the BDAs, we pulled from the state section out on Horse Creek. They were clearing out the cottonwoods and that. And so we were able to get those, and literally within hours of them being cut, or days of them being cut, we were able to get them into the stream. And so utilizing as many local resources as we could too.
Good questions. Any others out there before we log off?
I have a question. If you can hear me okay.
Yep, we can hear you. Go for it.
I'd like to know if there's a big difference between what different districts, conservation districts, can offer to people that live in that area. Are they all pretty much the same?
Well, every conservation district across the nation operates a little bit differently based on their local constituents' needs. You know, we're a huge agriculture community here, so we do work a lot with our agriculture producers, both on public and private land. Our range program does a lot of monitoring with permittees. We're doing wildlife friendly fence projects here, doing some conservation planning with ranches. We have a huge partner network in this county. I think the public-private interface has a lot to do with that, and people working to rebuild some of those bridges that may have been burnt in the past. But really, we're starting to reach out a little bit more into the more urban community, but we don't have as big of a need for that here yet. But I know in some places that do have like a larger like town community, or they'll do like a lot of urban conservation, putting in greenways. And so it really kind of depends on the needs of your specific constituents within your county or your district that you're working in.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, well, with that, thank you so much to Melanie and Sage again. That was great. And thank you all for joining us today. I will get this recording put up on our website as well as the Sublette BOCES website, and you can all access it at a later time or email it to people you think might benefit from learning more about, what was covered here today, conservation planning in general, or some of these neat projects that have happened at the Ryegrass Ranch. So with that, I will, I'll send out an email and check our website. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Jess, for doing this.
Yeah, I'm glad you could all make it.
Thank you.